I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes while our guest can get the headsets.
We appreciate you. Everybody's talking.
I think we're okay.
You should give them to reporters, not to the staff.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, there's more.
So let's start this again now that we have headsets for everyone. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this press conference for the opening of the World Trade Organization's 13th Ministerial Conference. We just concluded the opening session of MC13, which saw the formal acceptance of Comoros and Timor-Leste as the WTO's newest members, and the acceptance of 8 new instruments of acceptance for the entry into force of the WTO's Fisheries Subsidies Agreement. So we're off to a very good start. I'm pleased to welcome His Excellency, Dr. Thani Ahmed Al Sayudi, United Arab Emirates Minister of State for Foreign Trade and the Chair of MC13, and Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director-General of the WTO. His Excellency will start with an opening statement, followed by the Director-General. We will then proceed to questions. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellency Dr. Ngozi, the Director-General of WTO, my friends and colleagues from the media, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today, especially those who have come from across the world to be here in Abu Dhabi. Please enjoy your time and looking forward to work with you all. It's an honor for us to be hosting the 13th WTO Ministerial Conference, which is taking place against the backdrop of profound change in global commerce. The UAE has been a member of WTO since its inception in 1996. And since our accession, we have engaged constructively and enthusiastically in its deliberation processes because we believe in an open, predictable, rule-based trading system. We're very much welcome the opportunity to host the organization's highest decision-making body and to help advance its objective. And in the upcoming days, the delegation will build on the months of work already undertaken in Geneva to try and achieve consensus on a range of outcomes. This necessity for consensus is a great strength of the organization. Every agreement that makes up the WTO is approved by every member. Naturally, the need to find consensus can also make it difficult to predict exactly what form of outcomes from ministerial conferences will take. 166 members brings many perspectives, priorities, and ideas to the table, and reconciling these requires tremendous statecraft and creativity from all sides. I have engaged closely with the memberships in recent months, and I know all delegations have brought these vibes with them to Abu Dhabi. Before opening the floor to the questions, I want to take the opportunity to thank my dear sister, Her Excellency Dr. Ngozi, the Director General, for her leadership, excellent teamwork spirit, here persistent on pushing the agenda forward, and whatever we're seeing here today, it's because her personal involvement in every aspect of the organization. Special thanks, Dr. Ngozi, from my heart, and I'm sure we have a long journey together, even beyond MC13. I want as well to thank the hard worker staff of the WTO Secretariat for their excellent support and collaboration, and for sure the tireless officials at my team at the Ministry of Economy, as well as Abu Dhabi Department of Economy, and the whole government who have worked long and hard to make everything ready for this week. I would also like to thank the many intergovernmental businesses and civil society organizations that have organized side events, panels, meetings in the margin of this conference, some of them in partnership with our own private sectors. Though the WTO is a member-driven organization, ministerial conferences are about the whole world coming together to tackle the pressing issue on trade. I'm very grateful to see many distinct voices represented. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a long week of negotiation ahead of us, and the final outcome may not be certain until the final swing of my gavel. However, at a time of uncertainty, it is heartening to see ministers from all over the world gathering here in Abu Dhabi in a good faith efforts to find consensus. I'm looking forward to working with them, with Dr. Ngozi and her team, to find consensus and taking the commitments on the global trade forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would now like to give the floor to the Director General for her opening statement.
Thank you, Dan, and welcome. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, so it's good to see you. Welcome to Abu Dhabi. For my opening, I just want to make 3 points. I think the first is that the multilateral trading system has shown a lot of resilience and is delivering in spite of challenges in the global environment. And the multilateral trading system with the WTO underpinning it is still delivering 75% of world trade, still on WTO terms. We just saw 2 new members, Comoros and Timor-Leste, join the organization, and we have 22 more in the queue. And you can see the joy with which they are celebrating, still celebrating their having joined. Joining the WTO is not an easy task. Timor-Leste actually is one of the fastest, having taken 7 years. For Comoros, 17 years. And you have to ask yourself, why do countries go through this? It is because they find value in the organization and because they find value in the multilateral trading system. So we have a lot of uncertainty. We made these forecasts of 0.8% trade volume growth for 2023, which we feel are going to be the performance will be weaker than that. We're still revising our forecast, and we also think that we'll come below the 3.3% growth that we forecast for this year. That being said, what is remarkable to all of us is how resilient global goods trade has been. If you look at the numbers, they're still at record highs. So helping businesses, households to adjust to the shocks that we've seen in the global economy is one thing the multilateral trading system underpinned by the WTO is doing. That's my first message, resilience. My second message is, even though we've seen this resilience, this is not a time for complacency. And I said this in my speech. We know that multilateralism is under attack in many quarters. We know that the open trading system, which I've always termed a global public good, that was created 75 years ago, continues to be questioned in some quarters. And it's not just the WTO, it's the whole multilateral system, the financial institutions. Multilateralism is under attack. And yet, cooperation on trade is vital. If we didn't have it, it would be very difficult for parts of the world to adjust. If we fragment, it would be very costly to the world, both developed and developing countries. The work we did that showed you lose 5% of global GDP in the longer term. I want to recall that to people. So we need to avoid fragmentation, and we need to focus on cooperation on trade. This is the second message. Let's not take the system for granted. Let's not be complacent. We really have to work to keep it going. If we don't have it, I think that livelihoods will be more difficult and more costly. As you have seen, it would be much more difficult to achieve some of the global objectives we have on climate change, on managing pandemics, and so on. So yes, we need to repair the multilateral trading system and reform it, make it fit for purpose, which is what we're doing, but don't take it for granted. My third message then just follows that, which is that international cooperation matters. I said in my speech that it's good to have strategic competition. This is what we're about, but we also need to remember when strategic cooperation matters. So these are the three. Without global cooperation, we'll not be able to solve many of the problems we have. And that's why coming together to strengthen the multilateral trading system is important. So resilience, cooperation, and no complacency. Those are the 3 words.
Thank you. Thank you, Director General. We have a few minutes for questions, so I will ask you. The ground rules are please raise your hand, and when called upon, please state your name and your media organization. And I'd like to underline that only journalists with the green media badge may ask questions. So our first question will go to Mustafa Abdel from Al Ittihad. Mustafa, you have the floor. We'll have a microphone brought to you.
Thank you, Dan. Dr. Ngozi, we are at the first day of MC13. How do you see the kick-off the first day, and to what extent you are optimistic about the outcome of Abu Dhabi Declaration for MC13, and what is still needed to keep the world trade more effective? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Mustafa, for that question. Yes, you're right. You asked about the first day. I don't know how many of you were in the room, but I've not seen such excitement in a long time. And I think there were 2 things that were exciting. So if you're there, you'll see for yourself. The accessions, because we haven't had any accessions in 8 years. This generated a lot of excitement. 2, the ratifications, which we celebrated. By the end of this week, we will now have 70 ratifications. That leaves us only 40 for fisheries subsidies 1, which means that we're within sight of being able to ratify the fisheries subsidies agreement. And if we do that, it will be the fastest ratification. So I think those things, have generated a lot of excitement. How do I see things going for the rest of the meeting? Well, we have a number of very important deliverables on the table that we are trying to achieve. These are things that matter for people. Let me just take fisheries. We did the first part. I want to recall that for 20 years, more than 2 decades, this agreement was on the table and being negotiated, and it never closed. We were able to close the first part at MC12 18 months ago, and we are working hard to close the second part. Why is it so important? This is all about sustainability of our oceans. So,
Go ahead, it's the other one.
oh, it's next door. Oh, as I was saying, it's not just about getting an agreement. It's about sustainability of our oceans. Our oceans are becoming 50% overfished. So what we're doing here is very important for people's lives. 260 million people depend on fisheries. So that's just fish 1. If we close it, this is what we're doing, delivering for people. Agriculture is another area that has been difficult. And I want to remind you again that for 20 years, we've not been able to land an agreement on agriculture. So people tend to forget these things and take things for granted. I'm very proud that after 20 years, we're able to break the back of fisheries, and we're working to deliver fish too. Similarly, agriculture is very difficult. It's a domestic issue for every country, so that's why it's difficult. For the first time, we have members negotiating off the same text. We were not able to do that in MC12 even. It fell up, and now we've got that, and we were cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to land an agreement, even to provide a basis for continued work in the future. That would be huge. We are not able to do that at MC12 for agriculture. Having members negotiate off of the same text is already a huge achievement. That's just 2 things that we're working on. I just want to mention another one. We're hoping that there's an investment facilitation agreement, which is a plurilateral agreement, but it has 126 members working on it, 3/4 of the membership. This is big. Just closing that here, which they are trying to do, would be very significant because it clears away the bureaucracy in the way of investment in many of the developing countries.
Thank you, Director General. Doug Palmer from Politico, you have the floor. If we can have a microphone for the gentleman in the center.
May I? I'm very sorry.
Hi, thanks for taking my question.
Hi, Doug.
Dr. Ngozi, there's a lot of commentary these days about how the U.S. has sort of stepped back, abdicated its traditional leadership role at the WTO. I wonder what's your view of that? And if it is the case, do you see other countries that are stepping forward to sort of fill that gap? China, for example, or maybe the EU, or is there a bit of a leadership vacuum at the WTO? And I'm not referring to you, I'm just referring to the members themselves right now. Is there a problem that there's really no leader among the countries at the WTO, and that's why it's hard to get things done?
I want to comment on this, and then I'd like His Excellency to please also chime in. I think that during my time, I've been 3 years here, I've seen the U.S. engage more. And I have to say that they've been quite constructive. And I said it in my speech. We've seen them engaging on the issue of dispute settlement reform, which for a number of years they did not. Now they're engaging, and they've been working actively. They are very engaged in fisheries, for instance, and they have been very active on that. I would say that across the board, I see a constructiveness and an engagement of the U.S. So I'm slightly not of the opinion that, they are not engaging or showing lead. I think things have changed. Doug, that may have been the case in the past, but it's not the case now. So that's my answer. Is there a leadership vacuum? I don't think so. Why I spoke about leadership in my speech, only to urge members to be leaders in terms of being able to make the necessary trade-offs that they need to make. If you're a leader, it means you have to give up something you want sometimes or compromise on it so that others may get what they want. That's what I was referring to. But I'm just trying to think carefully through your question. I don't think there's a leadership vacuum. I think we have several countries who consider themselves leaders, and they've not abdicated. They just need to exercise the leadership in a way that will help us get results. So that's not why we're not getting, or there are no results. The ability to make the requisite trade-offs. And I think, as I told you in the corridor, I'm cautiously optimistic that they will be doing those trade-offs. Excellency.
I just want to add to what Her Excellency Dr. Ngozi said. The model or the work, the mechanism here within the organization is by consensus. So things has to be agreed upon the member states. In MC12, we managed to have a package which was agreed among the member states. So everyone showed the leadership. And the presence of all member states, plus observers here today, show that the momentum is there as well to continue with the same direction. At the end of the day, it's not only one country that's going to take the whole decision. It's the consensus that is going to move things forward, which we want to have at the end of the MC13.
Can I just add something very quickly? His Excellency raised a very important point, the consensus decision-making at the WTO. Of course, it makes things quite challenging. But I have to say that we're a unique organization. This is the only place now where the smallest, poorest country has the same voice as the biggest, richest one. And I'm rather proud of it. It makes things tough. But it also means that everybody has an equal respect and equal ability to participate. And that is very rare. And that's why the WTO is precious.
Thank you. We're going to take a question in the front, the gentleman from Togo, whose name I cannot recall. I believe he will pose his question in French, if I'm not mistaken. Vous parlez en français?
Comme Gada du Togo. Oui, oui. Madame la directrice. Je vous salue avec tout le respect possible. Alors, vous avez, l'OMC pense lancer, ou bien vous avez déjà lancé, le fonds des femmes exportatrices dans l'économie numérique. Alors, vous savez, quand on prend les PME, ce sont les femmes qui contribuent beaucoup à l'agriculture, même au commerce. Mais heureusement, ces femmes ne maîtrisent pas l'outil informatique, ne disposent même pas de l'Internet jusqu'à se connecter et participer quand même à l'économie numérique. Alors, dites-moi, avec ce fonds, qu'est-ce que vous voulez faire pour que ces femmes puissent sortir de ces problèmes d'accès à l'Internet pour arriver à avoir, par exemple, à pouvoir exporter et avoir les informations nécessaires et accroître, par exemple, leur rentabilité?
Bon, merci pour la question. Je vais répondre en anglais. Je pense que c'est plus facile pour moi, plus vite, plus rapide. I don't agree with you that women are not involved in trade. Both of us are from West Africa. Who trades in West Africa? It's the women. You know, so they do all. They do agriculture, like you said, but they are also in trade. So, but you're right. We need to also help those who are involved purely in agriculture. Most of the women, they farm, they process, right? And they sell in the market. So what we are trying to do with this fund initially is to first help those who are already trading digitally. You know, the idea is to scale them up because many of them have very small scale businesses. And most of the time when they want to expand, they don't have access to funding, to financing. So we are going to target those who are already doing business digitally. Then for those who are not, we have not forgotten them. We have another project with the World Bank where we are trying to help African countries get digitally connected, the digital divide, to take care of the problem you're talking about. We are starting with 9 pilot countries in Africa, and we also had a very good launch of that here. I don't know if you saw that. We had a digital trade in Africa launch. And these 9 countries, Togo is one of them. So we are going to help Togo to get the hard infrastructure to connect the country, but also the soft regulatory framework. And that is how we are going to try to work with those who don't have connectivity, because you're right. You can't trade digitally if you're not connected. So we are working from 2 ends.
Thank you. In the interest of gender balance, I'm going to start calling on some of our women reporters. So Emma Farge from Reuters, and then after I'll take the lady in the front of me.
Good morning, or sorry, good afternoon, Director General. I'm a bit jet lagged. I wanted to ask you if you're satisfied with the level of ministerial participation so far. People in the corridors are mentioning the fact that India's minister, who is a big player, is not here. Is that going to hamstring negotiations at all in the early days? And may I also ask a question for the host? I was wondering what you can do to help with negotiations behind the scenes. Do you have teams that can help put pressure on countries, or what devices do you have in place to really try to get a deal this week? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Emma. Good to see you. I think the level of participations of ministers is excellent. Virtually every minister, and some have 2 who are in their delegation. Some have come with Minister of Fish and Agriculture in addition to Minister of Trade, Ministers of Foreign Affairs. I think about India, we knew ahead of time. If you recall, India is going through an election. So the minister is very politically engaged. Since he told me he's running for a seat himself, so he has to spend some time. And I know that tomorrow there was a long-planned event in Delhi, a textiles expo. He's also Minister of Textiles, so he has to be there because the Prime Minister is opening it. So there's no mystery, it's just some slight mistiming, and he will be here with us. In the meantime, India has a very able head of the delegation whom we know, the Commerce Secretary. So I think we're in good shape there. I'm not too worried about that.
Your Excellency.
So the Indian minister is coming in end of the day tomorrow, so he will be here. Regarding the second question, we do have a very strong team, which is following on the negotiation, and we're going to make sure that we provide the right platforms and environments for the member states to ensure that they speak freely with each other. And we're going to work with everyone to ensure that there's a consensus comes out from MC13.
Thank you. The lady has been very patient with me. I will give her the floor. Madame, vous avez la parole.
Merci. Je salue le présidium, surtout Madame Ngozi, pour le travail abattu jusque-là. C'est un travail de titan et je l'admire beaucoup. Félicitations, Madame. Cela dit, j'ai deux préoccupations. La première, les travaux de la conférence, 13e conférence, sont lancés ce matin. Et vous avez énuméré un certain nombre de sujets ou de questions, si vous voulez, qui seront au menu des négociations, lesquelles nous allons retenir principalement. Vous allez me dire que toutes les questions, les sujets énumérés sont importantes, mais les plus en vue. Si vous pouvez, s'il vous plaît, revenir sur quelques sujets importants, nous allons tenir compte de ça. La deuxième préoccupation, tout à l'heure, dans votre introduction, vous avez 3 objectifs, entre autres, réparer le système multilatéral commercial. Et je vous pose la question de savoir quels moyens, par quelle alchimie, vous allez réparer cela, parce que se pose toujours une question qui date déjà d'une vingtaine d'années. Même si à 2 jours, vous avez signé un partenariat sur le coton avec la FIFA, le groupe du C4 est satisfait, mais reste encore insatisfait. Parce qu'ils ont toujours réclamé quelque chose que vous savez, nous tous nous savons, la suppression des subventions des pays industriels. Parce qu'il y a les PMA qui s'efforcent. Et quand on prend le groupe du C4, c'est uniquement les PMA. Et ces subventions des pays industriels plombent leur production sur le marché mondial. Donc, quelle stratégie vous allez adopter? Parce que vous voulez changer les choses. Merci, madame.
Well, thank you for that excellent question. I think, let me start. I didn't use the word repair. I said reform. Reform is very different from repair. Benin. Enchanté, madame. Sois le bienvenu. Donc, je dis réformer. Ça, c'est vraiment différent de l'autre. Hein? Repair is not the same as reform. So I said, we have a system, we have to reform it, and we are reforming it. Okay. But to get to your question, look, every single thing we are working on is important in the sense that it impacts on people. There are not that many things, so it's not like we have a long laundry list. We are working on delivering fisheries. You know that in Africa, we are losing $5 billion every year from illegal fishing, overfishing of our waters. And we have 12 million people that depend on fisheries for a livelihood on the continent. So this is important that we want to do this to get this agreement to manage what is happening and stop that. So that's important. You just mentioned agriculture and cotton. We had the cotton event, and you're absolutely right. We are trying to approach the problem of cotton from 2 angles. One angle is development angle, and the Cotton for asked for it, which is what we are trying to do. How can we, whilst we are trying to work on the problem of subsidies, or we call it domestic support at the WTO, how can we help them do better? And one of the things that we saw is why can't we add value to the cotton in place? On the continent, we now have the African Continental Free Trade Area. If we can process the cotton and we can add value to it, we can produce T-shirts and all the other things which we sell within the internal market, but also externally in the football economy, which is worth $270 billion. And you heard Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, say that 70% of that economy is in Europe and very little in Africa. So we are trying to tap that. But we haven't forgotten the problem of subsidies. We are working seriously on that. But that is tied to other types of issues in the agricultural negotiations. It's tied to what we do on public stockholding, PSH. It's tied to, they're all related. It's tied to market access. So that's why, for the first time, I'm making the point that for the first time we have a text that we are working on these issues. So let's work on it. Let's see if ministers can come to an agreement that will at least give us a platform to begin to work on domestic support, on reducing those subsidies that are anti-competitive in the cotton sector. So we've not, for 20 years, we've not even had people agree on a text. Can you imagine? Not even agree on a common text. This is the first time we have people here negotiating on a common text. So that is already a major advance. And we'll see whether they can lay the foundation for more work on reducing subsidies later.
We have time for a few more questions. The gentleman in front has been patient, and as our friend from Benin has reminded me, if you could identify yourself, name and media, please. So.
I'm SM Rashidul Islam from Bangladesh, working at National News Agency.
Sorry, from where?
Bangladesh, working at National News Agency. Madam DG, WTO agreements never had any labor rights issues in them. Recent draft fisheries subsidies agreement had an issue of forced labor and prison labor. Is it a new shift from the original mandate of the WTO? Another question, does WTO focusing on more in environment protecting issues?
Well, thank you very much. I think there are some members who are negotiating, who are interested in issues of labor rights. So we'll have to see what happens in the negotiations, how this is or is not incorporated. But I want to tell you something. There is no single member who has said to me that they support the use of forced labor. None. So all the members say they have legislation that militates against forced labor. So some members are trying to see whether in the negotiations on fish this can be an issue. I don't know whether this will be the case or not. So let us see. It's members to members. I cannot predict how that will go. That's the first. And the second part was?
We got to environment.
On environment. You were asking whether the WTO is shifting to deal with environment. I'll say one word, but I want His Excellency to also add, because he has a good vantage point. Look, trade has been instrumental in helping to solve climate change issues. And we do not believe that you can really get a handle on solving environmental issues or climate change without trade. Just think of the diffusion of technology, solar panels and solar systems and other renewables. How do they get, and technologies, how do they get from places where they are made to where they are needed? It's through trade. So trade is critical and should be part of the solution to environmental problems and to climate change. So it's not that we are changing anything, it's just that it's happening already. And what we need to do is consciously look at our policies, trade policies, and see, are there any more ways that trade can help solve climate change, decarbonization, getting us to net zero by 2050. So there's no shifting. I think we're already doing it, Your Excellency.
It's not about shifting. It's about how we are looking at the picture. We can look at not only the sustainability and environment, we can look at technology as a threat, but at the same time, it can provide huge opportunities. Trade is the same when it comes to sustainability and environment. It could provide, and it is providing a lot of opportunity if we are looking at it from the angle that is positive and to push the agenda forward. So our overview of the topic and all other topics, that we always have to look at the bright side and how can we use those to flourish the growth of the global trade. And if it's going to be about sustainability, we welcome it and we're going to push that forward if it's going to bring prosperity and development to nations.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think we have time for one more question, and you've been very patient up front as well. I'll give the floor to you. If you could give us your name as well as your media, as well, please. And if we have a microphone for our friend.
Good afternoon and salam alaikum. Dina Kamel, reporter from the national newspaper in Abu Dhabi. I had a couple of questions regarding the interest of some Arab countries to become members into the WTO. We've heard that it is a little bit more difficult for some of these countries to join. If you can talk to us, please, about the barriers to entry for some of these countries and what progress they've been making so far, particularly with some of the economic and geopolitical headwinds that some of them are facing in the region. My second question is regarding Dr. Ngozi had mentioned that global trade in 2024 is likely to come under the previous forecast of 3.3%. Can you tell us by how much below that could be revised downwards? And finally, we heard earlier today that the UAE had put in $5 billion in various investments, and that there could be more in the pipeline. Perhaps if Minister Dr. Thani Ziyudi can tell us what to expect further investments and in which areas, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The accession of countries in the Arab region is very important to the Arab members of the WTO, and I was with them yesterday in their meeting, as was His Excellency Minister Ziyudi, and this is one of the topics. That's why they are very delighted that Comoros has become a member. It's both an African and an Arab country, so it's a big celebration. But you're right, about 7 to 9 countries now, if my memory serves me, are in the pipeline. Now, you know, some of them started negotiations some time ago, and due to internal domestic issues, sometimes conflict-related or economy-related, there have been lapses in this. I mean, we have several countries, actually. We have Iraq, we have Syria, we have Libya, we have Lebanon, Sudan, to name a few, who are all trying. And because, as you mentioned, the conflict and the fragility, that sometimes holds back the progress. Because you know, in trying to accede to the WTO, it's quite arduous. You have to negotiate agreements, market access agreements with virtually most of the members. And this takes time to be able to agree with them on these things. There are various other requirements. I won't go into technical details. You have to meet, which take time. You have to pass legislation in the country to underpin these agreements. That means changing your regulatory framework and your legislative framework sometimes. And you know, politically, sometimes this can be difficult. So this is why when a member succeeds, it's such a big celebration. I think that when there's more stability in some of the countries, they'll be able to work faster. There's a delegation from Iraq, actually most of them, and they're trying to talk to us, and they want to resume. We're very eager. Lebanon had visited the other time, also wanting to revive. We are very eager. So that's where we are. I think anyone that feels they're ready to move forward, we'll work with them and try to go as fast as possible. And then you asked about the revision. We are working on it now, so I can't give you an estimate yet by how much will come under. But just looking at the headwinds, we have economic headwinds. You know that the IMF and the World Bank have revised the forecast for global growth downwards slightly. And once aggregate demand is low across the board in almost every country, this has a bearing on trade, except for the US. The US economy is doing quite well. India is doing quite well. But in all the other countries, I think we have sort of flatlining of aggregate demand, and that has a bearing on trade as well. Then we've got all these conflicts you see that I referred to, the Red Sea. We've got climate change phenomenon in the Panama Canal. So we have other types of things impinging on the supply side. That's why we think that, the risks are on the downside and will be coming in, but I can't give you the exact number. And I think the other question was for His Excellency.
Yeah, the third one is about the announcement of His Highness. We, through His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, the Foreign Affairs Minister, announced 10 million grants to some of the funds under the organization. We announced yesterday that 5 million is going to go to the digital fund for women that has been mentioned at the beginning. 4 is going to go to the integrated framework for LDCs, which is around 4 million, and 1 million is going to go to the fisheries. So that makes up the 10 million, inshallah. Beside that, this is the grants. The investments is going to move on. So we're exploring the technology, more investments, more projects with the as part of our foreign trade and foreign investments policy, and that is business as usual for us.
Okay. I'm afraid we've run out of time, so I'd like to thank His Excellency Dr. Tani Al-Zayudi and the Director-General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, for joining us. Please consult the WTO website for updates on all the happenings at MC13. It promises to be a very busy week ahead of us, and we wish you a pleasant day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
We're going to join the